Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. That sounds like a hearty Caribbean welcome. My name is Kamisha Kelly, and I'm delighted to be one of the persons guiding you through this afternoon's Ask the Secretary-General 876 Live. This is a youth forum where we'll discuss the CSME, the role of youth in advancing the single market. Now, we are absolutely pleased to have the CARICOM Secretary-General with us. And there are other special guests, you young people, in the audience and streaming with us online from all around the Caribbean. So, to make the official welcome, let me invite O'Dane Horton, CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Jamaica, to greet you all. Please make him welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, young people. Hi. All right, thank you very much. So on behalf of the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps, I would like to welcome you all to our annual CARICOM Secretary-General Youth Forum. This is an annual forum that is held ahead of the Heads of Government meeting each year. So basically, today in this meeting, the aim of this session is to engage the Secretary-General on several pertinent issues that are affecting young people all over the Caribbean, such as the role of CSME and what we have to do as young people in regards to CSME. Some of the effects of climate change, we know that's a very big issue that are affecting a lot of small island states all around the world. And we'll also look into mental health, what exactly is happening in the Caribbean region in mental health. Probably bring up some statistics as in what's happening on mental health, and to try and get an understanding of where the Secretariat is at and what are some of the activities that the Secretariat is doing in regards to tackling these issues. So once again, I would like to welcome all of you young people with all the bright minds who have all the questions towards the Secretary-General, and let's make it the most interactive session ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, O'Dane. In Jamaica, we have a vibrant Ministry of Youth, and we are very delighted as young persons that is headed by a young person. And so let's now welcome to the lectern Ms. Nikita West, Senior Director in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information.
You know, the space is a little small. I know that. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Ambassador Irwin LaRocque, Secretary-General for CARICOM, Ms. Hillary Brown, Programs Manager, moderators, Ms. Kamisha Kelly, Research Officer at Salises, and O'Dane Horton, CARICOM Youth Ambassador, or current and past CARICOM Youth Ambassadors. Welcome. Staff of the Youth and Adolescent Policy Division, particularly Mr. David Horton, who made this all possible. Youth from Jamaica, you distinguished youth. I'm so sorry I can't see the other young people because, wow, what we have in front of us, I know we have some burning questions. And of course, UATV, thank you all for being here, and welcome to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, particularly the Youth and Adolescent Policy Division. Hope you feel welcomed already. We are indeed delighted to have you all here at the Youth and Adolescent Policy Division to host the Youth Forum on CSME, the role of youth in advancing the single market. It is indeed a timely and relevant time for us to have this discussion as we are now implementing our new national youth policy and, of course, unleashing our youth innovation centers here in Jamaica so that we can incorporate, collaborate, and coordinate efforts across the regions and share our regional perspectives because, indeed, we do have a lot of common features across the regions. You know, just last week, I was able to share and have discussions with young persons who are doing great things, great entrepreneurial ventures that actually could be so beneficial for Jamaica here. I mean, I think in Trinidad and Tobago, they were using bear with me, I don't know the technical term, but you know the thing that washes up on our shores? Sargassum, thank you. They're using it for fertilizer. So imagine, this is something that we indeed have a problem with across the region, and see, how we could share across the region to see how we can support and expand such a venture. So it's just a great time for us, a great opportunity to explore synergies as well as regional perspectives to build our youth cadre, increase youth participation, and of course strengthen our efforts in creating a sustainable economy. I hope that this dialogue speaks to this today, and for us to become more aware as well as the relevance of CARICOM, and for us to speak to it across our young people and share it among our other young persons. Thank you all for being here, and I hope we have positive discussions, and so that we can benefit all youth across our region. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nakita West. Now, interestingly, she said it is the right time for us to be having this kind of conversation. And if I look beyond the regional context, let me look locally first. And we know that Jamaica has just done, and Parliament has looked at the Golding Report, right? And there were critiques that we didn't have enough of a youth voice in the Golding Report, but we've had youth responses to the Golding Report. In the global context, we know that young persons in the UK are battling about Brexit. So that's a huge conversation in all of Europe about the future of young people and the future of their integration model, which was looked at by so many other parts of the world as an example of how integration could work very, very well, including the market economy. So I'm sure, Secretary-General, you know that there are lots of questions coming at you. Young people want to know how we can make the future of the Caribbean region. So we have to continue on now, and we are getting ready to hear from Ambassador LaRocque himself. So, to do the introduction, let me invite a friend and former CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Jamaica, Andre Marriott Blake. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, Madam Master, so much. Now, they say that you can tell a lot about a gentleman by the socks he wears. I tell you, SG, quite debonair, I must say. I tell you, Secretary-General, is it? Secretary-General Ambassador Irwin LaRocque, Dr. Hilary Brown, Programs Manager, Gender Community Development, Nakita West, Senior Director of Youth and Adolescent Policy, CYAs, former CYA, or A's. I see Teresa Gilbert Roberts. Terrian, I'm sorry, Dr. Terrian is in the house, I believe so. Former CYA as well. Other youth leaders, good afternoon. Ambassador Irwin LaRocque, a national of Dominica, is the seventh Secretary-General of the Caribbean Community. He has a wealth of experience in management, public administration, economic development, trade, foreign affairs, and diplomacy. Ambassador LaRocque is firmly committed to deepening integration within CARICOM and advancing cooperation within the wider Caribbean. He is also deeply committed to youth development and has dedicated significant time and effort to this aspect of his work. A former Assistant Secretary-General for Trade and Economic Integration at the Caribbean Community Secretariat, Ambassador LaRocque provided strategic leadership for the continuing implementation and further development of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME. He firmly believes that the CSME cannot succeed without the advancement of the social sector, such as human resource development and, critically, youth. Prior to joining CARICOM, the ambassador served with distinction at senior management levels in the public service of Dominica for more than 18 years, during which time he served in several capacities, including principal advisor to the government of Dominica on all matters pertaining to regional integration and international trade. His passion for integration was ignited during the time as he became Dominica's senior policy advisor on the revision of the original Treaty of Chaguaramas, which established CARICOM and served on the Intergovernmental Task Force, which resulted in the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. He also served as permanent secretary in various ministries, including Trade, Industry, Enterprise Development, Tourism, and Foreign Affairs, where he headed the diplomatic service. He also has worked in the private sector, a man of many, many skills and trade, clearly. Ambassador LaRocque was educated at Queen's College, the New School for Social Research, and NYU, where he majored in political philosophy, political economics, and economics. Ladies and gentlemen, young people all, please help me in welcoming a seasoned man of CARICOM, a man who I can also say is a seasoned youth, having always engaged us in a way that is fulsome, wholesome, and comprehensive. Without further ado, Ambassador LaRocque.
Thank you, Andre, for that invitation. Every time I hear it, I say to myself, is that really me that they're talking about? Because it sounds different. But let me say good afternoon to you all. And as usual, what a great pleasure it is for me to be here to interact with you, not only those of you in the room, but of course, the youth throughout the region. And as Andre has said, it's something that I started, I think at Dwayne's request. Dwayne? Yeah. Dwayne suggested I needed to do a social media interaction with the youth. I forget what year that was, Dwayne. Of course, Dwayne is a former CYA CARICOM Youth Ambassador, and I accepted the challenge. And ever since, the CYA has been organizing these events, this forum. It's your event, and I'm here, as you aptly put, to answer the questions that you ask. Ask the SG. I like that. It means that you don't expect me to give a speech. But before we get into this, there are some formalities I must do. I need to recognize our wonderful moderators for this afternoon, Kamisha and Odain, who is also Ambassador and Deputy Dean of the CARICOM Ambassador Corps. I want to thank you for what you're about to do and for all what you've done. I want to recognize, of course, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and to thank the Senior Director, most Youth School Senior Director, for being here with us and for welcoming us. And of course, I must recognize our former CARICOM Youth Ambassadors, of which there are several in the room, some of us who I know for some time, and I see Cherry Ann hiding in the back there. Somebody referred to her as a researcher this morning, and I was quite pleased to hear that. Yeah, so as you know, we're here in Jamaica, just about getting ready to hit off on the heads of government meeting, which starts in Montego Bay. The official opening will be on Wednesday evening. As usual, our agendas are always packed, but there's some special items. And one of them, of course, is the CARICOM Single Market and Economy. When the heads met last time in Haiti, having put forward a report on where we were, how far we've come, and what are the issues that are still bugging us in terms of making advancement, the heads decided we must have a special session. So a significant part of this meeting here will be devoted to the single market and economy, including, of course, the Bruce Golding report that will be discussed. There are several other items on the agenda. I'm sure some of them would be of interest to you. Two of the topics that we have here are included on the agenda, the other one being climate change, disaster preparedness, and resilience. We also have, I'm sure the questions are going to come, so I'm going to mention it, the marijuana report, which is hot off the press just last week. That will be submitted. And a number of other issues that will be discussed, and as we go along, I can shed some light on those. The Youth Ambassador Corps has always been a partner with us in the CARICOM Single Market and Economy. There are 4 areas that the Corps normally deals with, and I just want to refer to them. This is HIV and AIDS, NCDs, non-communicable diseases, climate change, and the CSME. And we're going to focus on the 2 of them here today. I believe, and I'm going to show you a little bit of my age. I don't always remember everything as clear as I should, but I believe it was in 2006 that we launched the CSME here in Jamaica. Leonard, am I correct? At UE. At that time, all the member states that are participating in the CSME signaled their readiness. The term was they were single market ready. Basically, they had put in the basic framework to allow for the market to operate within our community. If you look back from 2006 to the Declaration of Grand Anse in 1989, it tells you how long we took from that declaration to declaring ourselves ready for the single market. We are now 12 years later. A lot of work was done, I would say to you, in the period leading up to 2006 and the period after 2006 in putting in place the legal arrangements for the single market economy. And I will say to you that despite all what you hear, and almost all of it is correct, that we made tremendous amount of progress. But there's a long, long way to go still. And the single market economy doesn't have an end date. It's not a prescribed end date. There are a number of things that we have to achieve. And we can't be working on the same things over and over forever. But to be honest with you, I think we've covered the easy parts, and now comes the hard parts. Anything dealing with a single economy or trying to approach and deal with a single economy is certainly going to be much more difficult because it calls for aspects that are normally controlled at the national level. Your economic policy, to some extent maybe your fiscal policy, which then impinges on national sovereignty, and then a whole debate emerges. But I think if we achieve as much as we can on the single market and begin to put in elements of the single economy that would support the single market, we'll continue to make progress. I get frustrated sometimes at the pace at which you're going. I'm going to be honest with you. But I just don't want us to think that we've done nothing or that we're not making progress. We had a consultation in Guyana 2 weeks ago to hear from stakeholders. I believe the ambassador from Guyana attended, and I was told that a number of other CARICOM youth ambassadors were online as well, to basically hear what was the perspective on how we are doing and what we're doing. And of course, rightly so, there was the expression of we need to move faster. There was the expression of needing to consolidate what we have, to make what we have work and work better. There was the expression of a need for more data, and we saw Terry Ann's statement, which I said to her this morning, I fully endorse, to understand what is the impact of the CSME on our daily lives, what impact is it actually making. And without data, you cannot really measure those impacts. And there was the crying need for communication, the crying need to tell the people of the community what's going on in a sustained way, not in fits and starts, but in a sustained way. And we cannot do it alone. It's not left to the Secretary-General only to address you once a year, maybe twice or 3 times a year in this kind of forum. I cannot do it without you. And I have to say the support that I get and the encouragement that I get from the CYA, the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps, has helped me to continue going. You're brutally honest, but with your honesty comes a measure of energy that propels me. And without you, we cannot do it. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what are the tools that we need in terms of getting you to be the chief advocates, the advocates in chief, along with myself and my executive management team, to get us going. We've made some movement, again with the encouragement of the CYA, to use the social media a lot more, and we're doing this. I feel sometimes we're still ancient in the way we use it, but we'll get there. We'll get there. One of the participants at the consultation 2 weeks ago said, "Get a young person to head." Kendall, no problem with you. Get a young person. Kendall is my communications director, program manager, who understands the lingo, the language of the youth, to help to craft the message. And I took that to heart. So I have to do something I have to do to get some young thinking in our secretariat in terms of how we communicate what we do to the people, how we communicate it to you going forward. So I'm going to be very anxious to hear what the questions you have. The matter of climate change is something that we are experiencing in our region. The sargassum seaweed, the scientists are saying, they're debating why is it that we're having this spate of sargassum seaweed throughout the entire Caribbean and along part of the eastern seaboard. And some scientists are saying it's a combination of factors, one of which is global warming, warmer temperatures in our oceans. It also has to do, of course, with what some scientists say the outflow of agriculture fertilizers from the rivers into our seas, and then it's fertilizing the sargassum seaweed. But there is an issue that is in part, at least, according to the scientists, as a result of climate change. We saw the mega storms that hit our region last year. I had that very, very difficult task to visit each and every one of them, and I've never seen such disaster. And I hope I never have to see such disaster again going forward. And the question that arises is that what can we do to become more resilient? What can we do to become more resilient? Starting with ourselves at our homes, in our communities, in our towns, in our villages, and of course in our countries. And these are the searching questions that we have to learn, questions that we have to ask and learn from the experiences that we have had with the past hurricanes. And it's not only hurricanes. We experienced droughts in many countries. I believe at some point, not now, but we had a very severe drought in Jamaica. Grenada had a severe drought, St. Lucia had a severe drought. And then you have these unseasonal heavy rainfalls, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and so on. So we're experiencing climate change in a variety of ways, and I think we just have to try and see what we can do to muster our resources to move on with it. The third topic, I'm going to confess up front, Madam Moderator and Mr. Ambassador, I'm here to learn. I'm going to listen very, very carefully to what you have to say and to learn, because it's a very important issue. I've been hearing the statistics, I've been reading the statistics. In the country where I reside, where the headquarters is, in particular, I've been hearing and reading the statistics, and it's a very worrying issue that is crying out to be addressed. And I do know that some countries are addressing it individually. But I have to confess we do not have a regional program in that area. But I need to hear what you have to say, what your cry is, what your call is, to see how we can, if it is all possible, to fashion some sort of response to this I don't want to call it a phenomenon, but something that perhaps has always been there, but is probably more acute now, that we have to address. So I don't want to speak for too long, because in terms of the introductory statement that we have, because I know you're going to ask me lots of questions. And I think I welcome that, and in the answers that I hope I can give you, a lot of more information will come out. I'm just going to say one thing to you. When I do not know an answer, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you I do not know the answer. All right? If I don't know, I don't know. But, so I'm not going to sort of mamaga you and tell you, and, you know, so when I know it, I know it. If I have a solution, I'm going to tell you I have a solution. If I don't, I'm going to tell you, well, give me some chance to look at it and come back to you on those issues. So I don't know if I've set the stage for getting our questions going, but I'm anxious to hear from you and to learn from you. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador LaRocque. So before we get into the questions in each thematic area, we're going to have a presentation from a young person just giving an overview of the particular area. One of the important areas is the CSME and youth, and we'll have that presentation now set in the context from a former CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Jamaica, Ms. Teresa Thompson. Please make her welcome.
They were correct. The space is very, you know. Good afternoon, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and certainly to see so many young people in such a very thriving, forward-thinking space. Looking forward to the questions that will be posed to SG and ensuring that we hold our leaders accountable and hold ourselves too accountable for some of the things and the commitments that we're going to make. My thing suggests that I have 3 minutes, and I think SG did an excellent job, really, of setting the context already. But just for the better knowledge base of the rest of us, essentially the CSME really is the heart of CARICOM. It is the real reason that CARICOM will function well, if at all, and benefit in very real terms, the individual persons. Certainly, the CSME, the CARICOM single market and economy, the concept of establishing it, we had set a goal of 2005 to begin establishing the CSME. And essentially, what the CSME was essentially conceptualized to do was to create more and better opportunities to produce and sell goods and services and to attract investment, to provide greater opportunities for economies of scale and to increase the competitiveness of full employment, and I know you're hearing some keywords, young people, employment, and improved standards of living for people of the Caribbean community. So you may ask, well, how does this affect young people? But already, if you look at just what it is set out to do, there are really 5 core pillars that the CSME was created upon with respect to free movement of skills and capital and that kind of a thing, and employment. And I know that you know that employment continues to be a painstaking area for us. Many of us can't seem to find employment. And so what the CSME aims to do is essentially open the Caribbean, making it our backyard, so to speak, then. In a Jamaican context, if you want to understand it, just as easily as we pick up ourselves and drive ourselves to Negril, drive ourselves to Montego Bay, that kind of a thing, that is the kind of environment that was conceptualized when the CSME was created. And so some of the opportunities really that exist, and it is really quite apt that we are asking ourselves, what can we do, or what is the value of the CSME to us? Because it's very important that we evaluate the things that we have and ask how we can benefit from them. But in so doing, we must also ask ourselves, how can we add value to that thing? Yes? And so that's what we're looking at doing today through the questions and then actioning. So essentially the opportunities that exist for young people would be larger market opportunities to increase flows of new capital. So just as easily as we own land space in Jamaica, what is hoped is that we can create a regional space where you can just as easily own land or any other type of bond or stock in the Caribbean region. There are a number of, for example, Trinidadian companies that exist here in Jamaica. There is absolutely no reason that young people can't own stock in those companies. You with me? No man in a show like you're sure. You with me? Do you want to know how to make that happen? And certainly, I don't know how many of us have heard of the skills, the CARICOM Skills Certificate. And if you don't know what that is, that's essentially a certificate that can be given to you upon application, certainly, and with a little cost, no, that allows you to work in any of the 12 CSME countries that have signed on to the CSME. So essentially, you've gotten a degree or an associate's from the University of the West Indies, University of Technology, even Hart. You can get that certificate, and what that does, it certifies you to work in any of these jurisdictions, almost as if you were just a resident of those countries. Tell me if doesn't sound like a good idea to you. Excellent. And so that's one of the other upsides of doing it. So it increases employment opportunities and improves, obviously, the standard of living because you can get better quality jobs. And lower consumer prices, it creates a regional space for companies to thrive and to ensure that persons see the region not just as a Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, but essentially as a unit. Because certainly you can imagine if we're competing at the international level against other countries like China who have billions of people, our voices will not necessarily carry as much weight unless we work together. And for the young persons who still are wondering, well, why don't we move quicker on some of the things that are happening? Certainly, those are some of the questions that we're going to be posing, and I don't suppose that SG knows all the answers. But with the implementation of things, what I will say is that they usually take time to develop something that works best for each person. CARICOM, in my opinion, would work well with some amount of political backing, some political will that would mandate us to do some of the things that we need to do. But because the model is not perfect yet, does not mean, in my opinion, that we discard it. It simply means that we work at getting it better, not necessarily right. All right, so with that said, I would leave SG to open the floor and to invite some questions. Certainly, I'm on the floor as well, and if you need any information that I can provide, we'd be happy to do so. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Teresa, for setting that context. At this point in time, we'll be taking questions from the floor in regards to CSME, and then we will hand over to the SG for his answers. Do we have any guiding questions coming out so far? Nothing burning? All right. Oh, there's a hand. All right.
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. I just want to know how difficult would it be to have one currency for all communities? Very difficult.
Usually you have to line up a number of your macroeconomic policies to get that done. Right now we have two systems of currency operating in our region. We have the floating currency as updated to Jamaica, and then we have it fixed, and then we have a variation of a fixed float. But basically it's a float that a fixed that's floated that was operating. There's need to we had done some work on that going back to, anyways, quite some time ago, and identified a number of milestones, preconditions that had to be met before. And it was proving to be extremely difficult. So when the heads met in retreat in 2011, they said to us, do not advance the work on monetary union, but consolidate the work that you're doing on the single economy, because you were spreading ourselves so thin on doing so many things. Consolidate what you're doing on the single market, and then begin to move on the other aspects of the single economy. Contrary to what is being said out there, and I keep reading it and I keep hearing it, that the heads put the single economy on pause. That is absolutely not correct. What the heads put on pause was the monetary union, working towards a monetary union. But it will be a very difficult thing, and I will say to you that given the time frame that I have to work in guiding our integration arrangements, I'd much rather put my immediate energies on consolidating what we have and making advances in some of the other areas that I feel we need to support in the market, in the single economy, that we need to support the single market. And that's someone who comes after I've left deal with this troublesome area of monetary union.
Great, thank you very much, SG. Do we have another question? We'll also be taking questions online, so I'm also monitoring our email. So I'll ask questions from our email as well. But we'll take another from the floor, then I'll go to questions online. Right, introduce yourself and then ask the question, please.
In theory, putting in place the framework for a single market should cause greater competition, in theory, and I mark my words, in theory. The theory is that you open up your market within the region, you must compete within the region, and become more competitive within that market space, which then prepares you to become more competitive globally, because ultimately the aim is to earn foreign exchange. Without the foreign exchange you need for investment in your infrastructure, in your social sector, etc. You can't do that. The thing is that we can only put, from the standpoint of the Secretariat now, we can only assist the member states in putting in place the framework for it. A lot of work has to be done at the national level in terms of working with the private sector groupings, in terms of achieving greater competitiveness. We set up an organization some time ago called Caribbean Export, which actually is doing some work in that regard. But I guess the demands on what it can do and what we can do is so large that it is not sufficient. So we have not been able yet to determine, to be quite honest with you, whether or not the CSME is reaching its objective of becoming more competitive. There are instances, and we do know of companies who started at the national level, use the regional market to grow even within the sub-regional market, for instance, in the OECS, and then expand its exports into CARICOM, and then went further afield. We have these examples, so it's not to say that the theory doesn't work, but it's what went into it to cause it to work. And if I can be maybe a little bit drawing on my own experience, when I was at the time an official in the government of Dominica, what I did when I recognized what were the opportunities that the single market was going to offer. At the time when I first joined the public service, we didn't have a single market, we had a common market. And when I recognized what the opportunities were, I began to work in my realm, being a permanent secretary in trade and industry, with the relevant private sector bodies. You have to know who you're working with. Encourage them to become less protective of themselves and seek to export within the sub-region and then go further afield. And we have had some companies that have achieved that level of competitiveness. And it's not just limited to Dominica, but there's so many companies that need to become competitive that there need for programs that will work with that. Small enterprise policies need to be put in place. One of the things that we're working on is possibly harmonized incentives to encourage businesses. The issue of developing entrepreneurial skills. You mentioned the entrepreneur you met in Trinidad and Tobago. There's also similar entrepreneurs doing the same kind of thing in St. Lucia and other places. And many of our young people, when we don't sometimes be aware of that. I met a young gentleman, a youth, and I was talking to him and asked him what he was doing, and he told me his business and so on. He says he's self-employed. So I asked, what do you do? He says, I export my services. I says, great. Where do you go to export your services? I don't go anywhere. I stay right here. I say, what do you do? He has his computer at his home. He designs plans for his clients. He makes his contacts. Very ambitious young man, made his contacts, and does all his transactions online. As an exporter, earning revenue into the country, self-employed. And that's how we started. I've since met one or two other people like that, but they're not enough. What caused him to be that person that he is what we have to ask ourselves. Was it in the environment that he was in? Was it that he was just propelling himself, he was ambitious, and that sort of thing? But he didn't let anything daunt him, and he went on. And I met another person again who started off with doing, what was he doing now? An online streaming company, selling his services not only in the country in which he's in. Somewhat like what UETV is doing for us today. Thank you, UETV, for the service. And started off as a one-person shop, and was able to get a little bit of change and buy some equipment, and then went further afield. So sometimes, you have the knowledge of what you want to do. You start small, you employ yourself, and you grow. I think the syndrome of depending always on governments giving us jobs and is something that we have to recognize. Of course, the governments have to put the policies in place to facilitate entrepreneurs to go forward. And I heard you speak about some of what you're doing on the entrepreneurial side. We have tried our bit in CARICOM at the Secretariat with the SIBO program, the entrepreneurial business program that whenever we've gotten the resources to undertake these workshops, we've done it. I think we've done them in 13 member states so far, where we've worked with a number of young persons, and we've followed up. I remember meeting two young persons out of the Bahamas who, out of that workshop, started doing landscaping in the community and grew. So these are small stats, and the problem is that the problem is so acute that we need a lot more of it to get done. We need a lot more, both at the national level and whatever we can do at the regional level to get it done. But the short answer is really that the CSME provides that framework. If it were not for the CSME, the people who I mentioned to you may not have been able to export as small micro enterprises to export what they have exported. And what is the environment at the national level, or the space within they operate at the national level, that would encourage them to go further afield?
All right, thank you so much for that response, SG. I'm going to take a question off our email address, seeing as SG just addressed on trade. So the question goes, it says, based on the size of the economies in the Caribbean, interregional trade alone will not be sufficient to grow our economies. So collaborative efforts among youths in the Caribbean can create cutting-edge products and services for global exports necessary. It is also of the view that the Caribbean cannabis industry can also move forward the region. what are some of the systems that are in place to support this, and what are the views of the Secretariat on the cannabis industry?
We only now received, well, as you know, the heads appointed an independent commission to review the matter of cannabis, marijuana, in terms of its the potential in the medical area, and went further afield to look at other social and legal aspects relating to marijuana. The commission has submitted its report 2 weeks ago, so it's hot off the press, and that report will be going to the meeting on later this week for consideration. There are a number of recommendations in there that will be considered. One will have to wait and see what comes out of the debate, the discussion at the heads level, to determine what actions will be taken. But I'll just perhaps point to a few areas, a few recommendations that has been put forward in that report. First and foremost, the issue of reforming the legal arrangements, the legal reform as it pertains to marijuana, the decriminalization of marijuana, and the regulation of marijuana as a controlled substance, and whatever laws are required to assist in the control of marijuana to regulate marijuana as a controlled substance is one issue. Another issue is the one asked about medical marijuana, to allow for that to flourish. Of course, you are now persons who are going to get into medical marijuana. I know Jamaica has been in the forefront. I know there's someone here who used to be at UE has made significant advances and has since registered his product and so on. But you're up against big pharmaceuticals because they're moved in already. And but we have to move fast in seeing what can be done. So we're at the very preliminary stage in that sense from a regional perspective. I don't know that we'll ever get, other than the medical aspect of the marijuana, trade in those products. The person asked about the market being too small, the economies being too small, which also implies the need to trade. Because international trade in marijuana, if I should, the cross-border movement of marijuana is controlled by UN resolutions that has caused it to be deemed to be a harmful drug. So we also have to work at the front of the United Nations to see if that can also be addressed properly. But you know, once big business comes into something, things happen. You know, all the time that we've been talking about it and we've been using marijuana, well, let's not say we have been using marijuana, but those who have been using marijuana, I stand corrected. Those who have been using it for medicinal purposes and having it at their homes, as has been the case, like another bush tea and thing, know the value of it and have been using it. And why must we put, you know, why must a youth man go into prison for having a spliff? And you have other people beating up on people and stabbing people and still getting out and so on. You know, so there's some real issues to be addressed. But doing that is not going to make us overnight become a major trader in medical marijuana unless we do the research, unless we have the capital to invest in it, unless we move quickly and recognize what are the advantages to getting it done. So I think I covered all the part of your yeah, okay.
I have. All right. Secretary General, we have this one from Giovanna Horton, and she asked these questions via Facebook. She says, will the CARICOM model of the voluntary accession of model legislation and protocols be changed to strengthen the CARICOM bloc of countries as a united trading body? So that's a trade question. And she also asked, and I wrote this one as well, what is CARICOM doing to make intra-regional travel affordable and accessible to those of us living in the Caribbean? Because the data shows that intra-regional air traffic has been in decline. And if we're talking about free movement of young people across the region, we have to consider the cost, the prohibitive cost, perhaps, of air travel in the region.
Okay. Let's deal with the easy one first, and the easy one is very difficult. Protocols as it relates to trade. Yes. We have 15 different countries, and everything that we come up with has to be negotiated. That's the starting block. So we always have to find the happy ground that will make everybody feel that they're at least not losing more than they're gaining, and that is a common ground for everybody to move forward. The protocols that we work on, usually, if not all the time, find themselves in one way or another within the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. The seed for it, the notion that calls that we must do certain things. So, for instance, a protocol on contingent rights, which I can explain if we have to, or a protocol on as we have done and incorporated into the treaty that deals with movement of skills and that sort of thing. Those protocols, once they are decided upon by the heads of government, become mandatory. Because the Caribbean Court of Justice and the Shanik Mairi case has determined that the decisions of heads of government form a significant part and constitute a significant part of community law. There is now a community jurisprudence by virtue of the fact that heads take decisions which stem from the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which confers rights on citizens, and which creates obligations on member states. So there's a body of community law. And then, of course, the court is there to be used from time to time to enforce it or to interpret it or to give advisory opinions on the matter. The problem that we're facing is that it takes a long time to negotiate some of those protocols. If I dare say, I hope I don't lose my job, too long. It takes too long. And we have to find a way of speeding those up, while at the same time, of course, answering the concerns which stem from the national level. Now, the governments don't only reflect. It's not somebody sitting at a desk that reflects a concern. They listen to their constituents. Each of the ministers and the governments listen to the voices at the national level. So that is where, to come full circle to what we've said, if there are advocates at the national level, and I've said so to the private sector when I met with them, I said so at the consultation a couple of weeks ago, we need advocates at the national level that will cause and encourage and be the demanders of the governments to speed up the negotiations, to put in place what they have indicated that they promised to do. When we did the assessment of the CSME, there are some countries who have only put in, for instance, in their legislation, 5 of the 10 areas that are agreed upon for movement of skills, and that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. We have to move towards it. Now, the court has ruled that if you don't have the legal, the law in place, you can manage it administratively, and some of them are doing it. But administrative arrangements does not guarantee something as much as a law would. So the things that we're going to be discussing at the upcoming meeting is timelines and time frames to get this done. I know that having myself read the Bruce Golding report and having listened to other persons, the notion of how do you treat with those countries that do not implement, what is the next step, because you can't just keep on going on like that, and that is going to be another part of the discussion that will happen in the coming week. So the protocols are not really, there are some that may be optional, that you may want to do it or not want to do it, but there's some that finds itself grounded in the revised treaty. On the cost of travel, it's too expensive. It's too expensive. I mean, it's cheaper to go to Miami, as we all know, and so on. But our business model for travel in the region is a very difficult one. It's an extremely difficult one. The long-haul carriers take off from point A and they don't land until point B. And that has implications, of course, for how many times they land and how many landing fees that they have to pay and the wear and tear on engine. I got an education from somebody in the aviation industry, and I was quite surprised about those things. That factors into cost. And then, of course, what everybody has been focused on is the taxes that the governments add to it. But how do you upgrade Sangster International Airport at Montego Bay? How do you upgrade the brand new airport built in the Bahamas? St. Vincent brand new airport. How do you build that? Where does the resources come from? From countries who, particularly in the past decade, have been under low or slow or even negative growth in their economies, under fiscal constraints. Where does the money come from? I am not trying to justify the tax, because there are those who argue, and there's merit in the argument, that if you were to lower the tax, more persons would travel, and more revenue will be earned, more spin-off in the economy, and so on. That's basic economic theory. But you need to have the cash at hand. So it's a dilemma. It's a real dilemma. But I have to say to you that the issue of the taxes and the cost of travel in our region is really, really high. I'm aware of it. It's something we continue to discuss. We are hopeful that with the new multilateral air services agreement, which is going to free up the airspace within CARICOM, that new smaller entrants will come into the market. It doesn't always have to be a Caribbean Airlines or Fly Jamaica or Bahamas Air or something like that. There are smaller airlines, and SVG Air, which operates 15-seaters, and those in Guyana and in St. Lucia and Antigua that could just go further from just the neighboring island and provide for more affordable seats and so on. And we're hoping that if we open up the skies, again, another aspect of the marketplace, that it will allow for that competition to take place. So I told I was going to answer this one is even more difficult on the protocols, and it is something that we've been working on. I keep telling everybody, if there's one area which I feel that up until last year I was lamenting that if somebody was to ask me what is the worst area of performance in my tenure, I was going to say transportation. I said that, but I got a glimmer of hope when we concluded in the multilateral air services agreement, which took us more than 10 years to negotiate. More than 10 years to negotiate. But at least we have it open and some countries have signed, and I'm hoping that more things will fall in place in that regard. There's also the facilitation of travel through airports. If you leave Guyana, for instance, and you're traveling up to St. Kitts and Nevis, I counted it once. We made 5 stops, and I went through 4 stops, and I went through 4 security arrangements, going through the scanner and so on. And why can't we get, using the word protocol of a small piece, some kind of understanding and a standard for security in our respective airports, that we know that if we come from an area that is determined to have been fairly secure, that you can't just go into another one. Why do you always have to go through the scanner and take out your belt and take out your shoes and take out your everything as you go along? And these are some of the facilitation travel. If you're paying money and you're not harassed, you might take it a little easier, wouldn't you? But when you have to be doing all these things as you go along, it makes it even that much more difficult. That's one of the things we're also working on.
All right, so at this point in time, we'll take 2 more from the floor, then 2 more from online. So, Crystal and Sachel here at the front.
Thank you, Odin. Good afternoon, Ambassador LaRocque. Crystal Thomas, President for the People's National Party Youth Organization. My question is, I suppose, mixed with a solution to the challenge that you raised about, or the challenge that was raised about transportation. How prepared or able is CARICOM to use technology to allow youth to navigate that CARICOM network? We spoke about employment, and the idea for the 63% of CARICOM residents who happen to be youth is not that we have to be in Trinidad to work in Trinidad. We're prepared to use the computer, the tablets, and the phones. But where do I go to find out which youth in CARICOM has a skills certificate who I could employ remotely from Jamaica to do work with me in my startup? Or for larger companies who might want to employ young people in CARICOM to further the initiative, where would they find such a database to maximize on the resources that exist?
We are working, thanks for your question, we are working on a labor market information system. We've been working on it with support from the ILO and the European Union. Some countries already had national information systems. Others didn't have it. So we are assisting those who have it and who don't have it in developing it, and seeking to integrate the system into a regional labor market information system that would indicate what is demands for particular skills, what skills exist, where they exist. And I think it will help us to address the fear that exists, that if we open our market, persons are going to come running. We know that persons don't leave their homes unless they know they're going for an opportunity to do something, earn some money and come back. They're not going for just for joke and sport. We hope that can relieve some of the fear that exists, but also it will, where skills are short, because that is part of the thing. We know that all the skills we require are not in all our national jurisdictions. And we know that if we allow our skilled, especially our youth, our skillful youth, to ply their trade, that competition will emerge, which will cause prices to go down. So I just hope that we can very soon announce the labor market information system. The point that we're at right now is inputting data. The data has to be inputted at the national level. Now, there goes the rub. We've done as much as we can do at the regional level. We've actually gone and procured equipment and gotten resources to procure the software. The rub is now to get the data imported.
May I ask where Jamaica is in that process?
Oh, geez, I can't answer offhand, but I can certainly get the answer by a little later or maybe tomorrow. But that's where we are, inputting the data. Thank you.
So Sashel, then
Sashel?
NIA, and then online.
It's fine. Afternoon, everyone. Now we heard the address from you, Ambassador LaRocque, and we heard the address from the former CARICOM Ambassador Teresa, and we spoke about accountability, we spoke about skills, accountability of our leaders, we spoke about skills and employment opportunity, and we understand that the substratum of the CSME is free movement. We spoke about that, and one of the things that came out was the issue of CARICOM moving slowly in some regards. And if we're talking about the 21st century youth and young people, we talk about movement and alacrity, and we cannot have policies and laws that are archaic for our generation or our generation. So one of the things that we want to ask is, it is widely acknowledged that the treaty establishing the Council of Legal Education monopolizes in favor of UE students, UE law graduates, over the supply of legal services in the single market economy. What has CARICOM done to remove this barrier that hinders non-UE law graduates to the CSME? I'm Sashel Hall, and I'm representing AskSG876, Jamaica. Association of Caribbean Students, Equal Access to the Legal Profession.
Take the next one. Young man from NIA. There you go.
Afternoon again, my name is Malik Malcolm. I'm currently the Director of Logistics and Event Management for the Integrity Action Movement. So that's NIA student arm. So my question is, for young people like myself to be advancing the agenda of the single market economy, what efforts are being put in place by CARICOM and CSME to really push for young people, to really get young people on board, and for me to feel like it's important? Why is CARICOM, why is the CSME important to me as a young person going forward?
Thank you for those questions. Over to you, SG.
Okay, the question, if you don't mind, I will take the last one first, because I think we can have a little discussion on the last one. I think what we're trying to do here is part of it, and we have to demonstrate that it is going to work for you, so that your aspirations can be met, as far as within the context, of course, of this, what we're trying to create. I think the information has to be made readily available on what the CSME is, how it works, what are the remedies that might be available if it doesn't work for you as a young person. And these outreach programs, for which there has to be a lot more. One of my staff was saying to me, it shouldn't always be me doing this, but others can join in as well, because then there are multiples of me out there doing that kind of outreach, which I fully endorse. And then to equip our youth ambassadors, when I heard the introduction, obviously she knows the CSME from what you said. So that kind of advocacy and making it work, so it's not difficult and frustrating for persons who want to use it. It's interesting to note that since we started with this skill certificate, and I just want to qualify, it is free movement of skilled community nationals. It's not total free movement. There's only 16,000 certificates have been issued. Only 16,000. We don't have data on how many persons were denied, but they're not, as far as we are told that there are not many at all. Very, very, very few, if any at all. When we try, we don't get the data from, since the certificates are issued at the national level, it's always difficult to get data in terms of what is being done. But when you think of only 16,000 skill certificates being issued since the late 1990s, that's really not much at all. It's only 16,000 people who want to move. And then there are persons, for instance, who may have already moved, persons who may have attended UE here in Jamaica and applied for a certificate and remain, and similar in Trinidad and Jamaica and other places like that. And there are some persons who have out of abundance of caution, gotten 2 certificates. So there may be some measure of double counting. So it really, every time I ask the figure, what is this? It amazes me as to how many persons have actually applied for it. 16,000 persons of a population. The single market population right now is a little more than 6.5 million people. Broadly speaking, of course, not everybody is a skilled person, but when you take that as a proportion, it's minuscule. It's minuscule. But that notwithstanding, there's still some challenges in how it operates, and we have to fine-tune those challenges. Council for Legal Education. This issue has been a burning issue for quite some time. It was really brought to the attention of the heads of government by the students, a similar body out of Guyana, because Guyana had a quota of only 25 students going into, there was a quota, and the quota period had expired, and it had to be renegotiated. And the question came up as to why is it that UE graduates have first call preference. And well, we've done some work on it, and we have our views on the matter. But we asked the heads of government, that is, after having considered the issue, requested the Council of Legal Education to do some work on it. The Council of Legal Education, we worked along with them in terms of defining the terms of reference and helping them getting funding for it, because an independent consultancy had to be done. And a report was submitted, I believe, or prepared. I don't even know the name. Last year. It went to our Attorneys General for consideration, the Legal Affairs Committee. The Legal Affairs Committee asked for some more time to study it and to get back to us, and that's where it is. Intuitively, if you're saying that you must go to law school to be able to apply your trade in the region, but that certain persons have a preference, intuitively that appears to be contrary to the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, because you're supposed to have national treatment across the board. There is a companion problem that has to be resolved, because if you do this, the question is where all the spaces for those students to go to. What do you do with the actual education system? Do you open it up? Do you convert the Council of Legal Education into a regulatory body rather than owning the law schools and allowing private investment or allowing state investment to develop the appropriate law schools to allow for it, but it's regulated in terms of the curriculum and ensuring that you don't have fly-by-night, quote-unquote, fly-by-night law schools? And I believe that's the direction we have to move in, because we need to have more specialized legal professionals in our community, not the normal general practitioner, but if you want to develop a niche in certain things. And we've seen it in the British Virgin Islands, we've seen it in the Bahamas, we've seen it in Barbados, where because of the international business sector there, and it's not always offshore, and you hear this offshore, there's some real international business operators. They're all real, but I mean, you have this thing that keeps saying that we're this tax haven community. I mean, there's some very serious businesses other than just financial services. And you need legal professionals to assist, and you need the appropriate accounting professionals to assist. And it opens up a whole new arena for the legal profession. A major shortage in our community. Somebody asked about harmonizing laws. We don't have draftspersons. We do not have legal draftspersons in our community. I only have one employed in the Secretariat. And before this one, well, 2 now. I brought on somebody on recently. Before that, we had 0. And before that, I had to depend on the good grace of the Commonwealth Secretariat to provide me with an outside person to come in to assist us in drafting legislation. And I know at all our member states levels that there is that problem. So we need draftspersons. So there are so many other areas in the legal profession where we need people. So I was hoping that report would have found its way to this meeting, but the AGs requested that at least the Legal Affairs Committee asked for some more time to have domestic discussions on the matter, and But it wouldn't surprise me if it comes up somewhere in the discussion within the context of the CSME. But I don't know if we can take a decision here or not.
We want to thank you also, SG, because CARICOM invited us to get the consultation process for the report. So we're part of the process.
Great.
All right, can we just give our SG a round of applause, please? No, we're not. But no, we're not finished, SG. But I think we can all agree that he has been fielding the questions really, really well. And we don't often get these direct responses from many of our leaders. So we do have to take the time to acknowledge that coming from you. But we do have some more questions. And I have two here from persons who are watching via the UETV stream. So Shamari Jones asks, Will CARICOM address the removal of barriers to the movement of people, such as individual countries requiring a skills certificate after one has been acquired in your home country? It is costly, time-wasting, and counterproductive. We also have one from Shalisha Samuel, who says, Has there been any proposal, SG, for the harmonization of the provision of legal services in the region, specifically the practice of law, and if so, is there an update on such a proposal? So the first one was about travel, removing barriers to movement of people, such as where individual countries will require a skills certificate from their country after one has been acquired in your home country. So it's a second certificate.
That is one of the issues that we're going to be putting squarely to the heads of government to hopefully resolve for us, for the community that is. The agreed requirement is one skill certificate. And there's a verification process, a process of verifying whether or not that certificate is in fact real or bogus. Now, that's what ought to happen rather than asking for a second one, is a verification process. Hold on a second. Thank you. And we need to make sure that verification process works. So that issue is one of the issues, as I said, will be put to the heads for discussion, and I'm hoping resolution. The other one had to do with, forgive me, I was distracted. I'm so thirsty, I was distracted.
Harmonization of law. Let me get it for you again from Facebook. My technology is failing me. Right. Has there been any proposal for the harmonization of the provision of legal services in the region, specifically the practice of law? And if so, is there an update on such a proposal?
I'm not sure. Maybe my legal expert here can help me understand the question. I'm not sure what is being asked because, as far as I'm aware, the standard for the law school is set by for the legal profession is set by the Council for Legal Education. So I'm not sure what else, and you have to sit the entrance exam, and you have to sit if you study law from in another jurisdiction outside of the community. When you come in, you have to sit that exam. So as far as I'm aware, and I may be wrong, that it already has some sort of harmonized approach to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
All right. So final two from me.
Sorry.
Final two. Sorry, Odain. Has CARICOM assessed if there are any opportunities or risks in light of Brexit and more nationalistic policies from the U.S.? Opportunities for the region, that is. And also, has CARICOM assessed any social policy or welfare risks for youth because of more precarious employment that young people now have? A lot of young people are employed, yes, but it's short-term contracts. And there is a little social security that's tied to those contracts. Back in the day, when most people got a job that came with health insurance and other bits of social welfare provisions, that is not the case right now. Many people, all they have is their contract, which allows them to get their salary or just a weekly, fortnightly, monthly pay. Have we considered that we may be at risk of some serious social welfare issues with many of the countries in the region having this large youth bulge now and therefore at risk of having aging populations?
Before you answer that one, SG, the question that I was going to ask can be added to that. Coming from Michael out of Barbados, it goes, to your knowledge, are there enough efforts being placed in creating jobs that will ensure that youth remain in the Caribbean countries and promote development of the region, thus reducing brain drain, which could add to Kamisha's question?
Okay, so there are three questions: Brexit, employment legislation, and keeping persons in our region. I don't think there's a politician anywhere who's not concerned about job creation. That's a fact. And job creation is not an easy thing. You don't create jobs. The governments, the days of governments creating jobs is something of the past, or increasingly of the past. You have to encourage private investors, private sector-led growth to create the jobs. But I dare say that it would be strange that there's a politician who's not very, very concerned about the unemployment rates. On the other hand, you cannot, you want to keep the skills because a great deal of resources are expended on the education sector in our respective countries, and it's difficult to see your best minds migrate to greener pastures. So it's not something. It's something that there's a lot of discussions on. I know, in particular, some of the professions that, for instance, that active recruiters come into our region for is in the nursing profession, in the teaching profession, and so on. And it is of concern, and there has been some discussion in terms of what can be done. But it's at the national level that is being done. But discussions happen, when you meet to determine what's the best way of addressing it. In terms of the short-term employment, these are issues that are addressed by national legislation. The employment legislation in our countries. I wasn't aware of this bit of information, but I was told many years ago that the legislation that is in place in our region was based on some sort of harmonized arrangement and based on some work that was done by the Caribbean Congress of Labour. It's something I need to research. Mm-hmm. I had a discussion, oh boy, I don't know how long it was ago, not too long, with the executive of the Caribbean Congress of Labour. They're the ones who brought it to my attention, and that predates my own knowledge of the community, so I need to research it. And indicated that a time has come for us to look at it again and see whether or not we should not be updating our employment legislation in our respective. So it's something that I certainly readily agreed with the Caribbean Congress of Labour that we'd be willing to work with them, and at the appropriate time when they're ready to come to us with some proposals, we certainly would be able to consider it going forward. Brexit. We began engaging with the United Kingdom very early on, and on terms of what would happen to our trading arrangements post-Brexit. As you know, our trade with the United Kingdom is governed by the Economic Partnership Agreement, the EPA. So when they exit, then the EPA ceases to exist as far as Britain is concerned, and we've reached pretty far in our. It's probably beyond the discussion now. We will have some agreements in principle that we're going to seek to roll over elements using the current EPA as the basis, roll over elements of the EPA that are relevant to us in terms of our trade going forward. And we've reached a point where at the technical level there's been some engagement and a discussion of what such an agreement could look like in principle, in broad text, in terms of the text and so on. So I feel, and the British United Kingdom government has given us the assurances that come March 29th, well, they have now gotten a one-year extension. I don't know if you're aware of that. They have a one-year extension that the European Commission granted to the British, where it's an interim period. So there's a 1 year beyond March 29th, 2019. But I feel very confident that when that date rolls around, that there will be no break in the trading arrangements, the preferential trading arrangements that we currently enjoy with Brexit. In terms of other trading issues that are taking place, we are concerned. We are concerned for a number of reasons. They seem to be done outside of the realm of the World Trade Organization. I recall when the World Trade Organization was created, because before that it was called not GATS, but GATT, General Agreement in Trade and Tariffs, and it was moved into WTO in 1995. And the WTO people at the time, the GATT people at the time, came to the Caribbean. They came to all of us They spoke to each of our countries. They even convened us collectively to encourage us to accede to the WTO. And the reason why, they said, as small states, you'll be protected by a rules-based system, that you will have somebody to go to, an arbiter, in case of a problem. And to see now the big powers going outside of that remit and imposing trade sanctions or imposing tariffs that are not in keeping, well, arguable, because it hasn't been tested yet, and I have to be careful with what I say, arguable, not in keeping with the WTO, is of great worry. And the fact that sanctions are imposed on individuals to support the domestic policy of a country that has impact on us. I am very much aware, excuse me, that there are investors here in Jamaica, in Guyana as well, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in Suriname, I'm not sure, upon whom they have shares in companies that are invested in our countries. And there's an imposition of some kind of sanction on the individuals, fettering the movement of capital and whatnot. And that is unacceptable. You know, you're pursuing your national agenda. It's your right to pursue your national agenda. But the extraterritorial impact of that on us is something that we on principle, that we cannot accept. In much the same way, over the years, we have stood up at all odds against the embargo against Cuba. It's unconscionable. And we'll continue to speak in that voice. And you will find in our region that there's one voice on those issues.
Thank you, Brad. So we will take two final questions for CSME. And then we will move over into the climate change discussion.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Ambassador. Kimberly McLeod, Generation 2000. I think by virtue of the fact that we're all here suggests a sort of optimism on the part of young people in terms of how CSME should work and the fact that we want it to work. However, I want to know from where you sit, you get that sort of optimism from the other heads of Caribbean countries. Certainly, I feel a little bit disappointed by the comments of Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves in respect of the CARICOM review and the findings or the suggestions. So I just want to know if you believe that those are the sentiments that are shared by Caribbean leaders.
And one more question from...
Hi, Chelsea Thomas Manuel. I'm representing with the Guild of Students. What strategies are being put in place by CARICOM to increase opportunities for youth? As we see that, you know, youth is very important. So what opportunities are you willing to put in place in terms of leadership opportunities to really spread the knowledge about CARICOM itself, as well as is there an assigned youth desk? Because, you know, youth, we're all coming together to say youth is important. So is there an assigned youth desk at CARICOM right now? Is there youth representative in order to speak up about the issues and to really, you know, aid you all in the process?
And SG, before you respond, let me just piggyback on that question. We have one from a young person from St. Lucia. It's about the youth desk. They say the youth program manager, the deputy program manager with responsibility for youth, Mrs. Pollock Beagle, left the Secretariat almost 2 years ago. Has this affected CARICOM's youth outreach activities, and what is being done to fill the position? All right.
Okay. Let me deal with the first question. I remain optimistic that we can move forward and achieve what can be achieved. Obviously, there are always different views on how far you can go and how fast you can go. Prime Minister Gonsalves expressed some concerns. We've heard it. They were said publicly. Some of his concerns relate to, as he puts it, being unequally yoked and trying to spread the benefits of integration further afield. But Prime Minister Gonsalves is a committed integrationist. I know that. He's someone who I have spoken to on several occasions about. He's written about it. And it's going to be interesting to see how the debate pans out at the meeting coming up this week. But I can say to you that there's not one head of government that sits in the councils that I have the great honor of sitting in and listening to the debates. There's not one head of government that is not committed to integration. There's not one. There will be different views on, as I said, what can be achieved now, what can be achieved later, how fast you can go, how slow you can go. There are different views. And that's what we're different people and different circumstances at the national level inform how we speak. So I'm not daunted by it. And it's good to hear if there are perceived challenges so that you can seek to address them. You know, if you do not know that there are perceived challenges with what you're doing, how else would you know how to address them? And I think also the fact that some of the issues that have been brought to the fore that require attention is taking so long is also a problem in causing some persons to wonder how far we can go. There's also a discussion, and I was saying so to one of my staff recently, how far can the current treaty take us? It's something we have to ask ourselves, because the current treaty makes provisions that obligatory in terms of the market, but in terms of the other areas, if you read the treaty, as I am required to from time to time to refresh my memory on what is in there, a lot of his best endeavors, a lot of his work to be done, and hence the need for us to move along with the work that we feel that it can be done now, and see how we go forward. But I don't know that there's ever a notion of going backwards. I don't, and I can say so without fear that when I sit in the council, I'm not discouraged by what I hear. Of course, I do have an issue, and I say it publicly, with the pace at which we're going. Okay. The youth desk, initiatives for youth. I mentioned earlier the CBO program that we've had. Let me see if I can. Hillary, remind me what it means. I know it's a CBO. Business opportunities. That has been, we've done these workshops in 13 of our member states. We've gone back a second time, I think, to 5 or 7 of them. Met with some of the youth that took part in these exercises to see how far they've gotten. We've I believe, done even worked with them on projects, that bankable projects, taking the next step. It's a small thing, but it's something that we're doing. We have sponsors for that, UNDP, USAID. Spain has given us small amounts of money. The problem we have is that we get the resources, it expires, and we have to go and look for more. But we keep on looking, and we keep on begging, and we keep on asking, because they recognize that it is a significant piece of work, and we have seen the successes. One of the things we're going to have to do is now to perhaps do something we don't do well. I'm going to admit. We don't boast enough about what we achieve. And we don't allow the persons who have benefited from what we've done to speak about it. And perhaps, Hillary, we have to go and record, do a little video with them. It's not expensive now, and put it online so that the persons who have benefited from this exercise can see how they benefited from it. I wish we could do a lot more of that. We had a program. We ran it, I think, 3 times, where we brought. We brought a cohort of 25 students from each of the CSME countries to visit another CSME country. So a group from Jamaica would have gone to Barbados and, really mix up it. And not only to just see what is there in terms, but actually talk to persons about opportunities. They met with the private sector. They met with the public sector persons. They actually challenged them on some of the issues pertaining to skill certificates and so on. And that was also funded. You will find that most of what we do is funded by donors, is sponsored. Again, we got the resources from the European Union. I don't think we can do it anymore. We've done it 3 times, and the resources have all gone, and I don't think we can do it. What I'm trying to do, however, and I have a proposal out there, is to try and see if I can develop an internship program in the Secretariat, so that young persons can come and spend maybe a month or 2, in the different departments of the Secretariat to see what's going on. I said I would like to do it. I can't say I'm going to do it because I have to have the money. People have to come. We do accommodate. I was being advised this morning that we do accommodate from time to time persons who are self-sponsored. We do accommodate that because we want to share the skills. And if I may take the opportunity to say that the Secretariat has a wealth of skilled individuals professionals second to none. And I know those individuals, and I know they're willing to share their knowledge and to pass on their knowledge. I'm hoping I can get funding for that. Yes, you're right that the skills desk, youth desk, sorry, has been vacant since last February. Since last year, February. I think we are in a very advanced stage of recruitment, and that soon enough we should be able to announce, or you'll be aware of who's on that desk. It's taken us a little bit long. I regret that very much, very, very much. And obviously, when a seat is vacant, it does create a challenge for getting the work done. So for whatever discomfort it has caused you, I apologize for that. For the youth program, I do apologize for that. It doesn't mean we've not been working. We have been working. I know Hillary, Dr. Brown has been working, and others have doubled up and trebled up. But it has taken us long, and I apologize for that. And we'll see how we can correct that very, very soon.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. All right, so are you feeling the heat? Yes. You have many concerns, right? And if we run the AC, we're also concerned about the electricity bill and the impact of that on the environment, right? So let's talk about climate change then. And so to give an overview of this segment, let me invite Eleanor Terrelong from the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council. Make her welcome, please.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Eleanor Terrelong. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to share with you. I'm here to talk today about a little bit about climate change. It's not a very sexy topic, I know, but it's something that is really all of our problems, and we have to be concerned about it. I had a presentation prepared, but there's no projector, so please bear with me. I'm improvising a little bit. So before I begin, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So everybody here knows what climate change is, or thinks they have an idea what climate change is. Well, when I was preparing this presentation, I found a very simple explanation of climate change. So anybody here has ever played the game Tetris, you know, with the blocks? Right. So imagine that the atmosphere above the Earth is the Tetris screen, right? And every molecule of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases is one of the Tetris blocks. So you know the objective of the game is that you have to clear the Tetris blocks before it reaches the top of the screen or game over. Now that's the exact same situation in our atmosphere with greenhouse gases. What we're trying to do is clear the greenhouse gases as they accumulate before it reaches that point where basically the Earth as we know it is no longer sustainable. And unlike in Tetris where there's game over and you can restart, there's no restarting with the Earth. So the first thing that we have to remember about climate change is that really and truly, this is all our fault. This accumulation of greenhouse gases is the result of industrialization throughout the centuries as we've been developing or think we've been developing as humans, or food processing or waste processing or deforestation. All of these things are contributing to these greenhouse gases that accumulate in the air. And it's these gases that are accumulating that are causing a number of effects. The first one that we're all feeling today is the temperature rise, especially the past couple of weeks. We know that that's something that's been affecting us. And this is also seen on a bigger scale in terms of drought events. A couple of years ago, we had a few years of very, very severe droughts, especially in the western side of the island. So that is something that comes from climate change. Additionally, because the sea is getting hotter, it's expanding, which is causing the sea level to rise. And this is affecting our coastal communities. And if you think about the Jamaican situation, where a lot of our government buildings and important buildings are downtown, along the waterfront, sea level rise is something that is going to affect us, and we have to prepare for it before we have a situation that we have lost that we cannot recover from. Other effects of climate change is that as carbon dioxide is accumulating in the air, the sea is absorbing that carbon dioxide, and that's making the sea more acidic. And what that is causing is the fish are dying out, and that's affecting the fishing industry. The coral is being bleached, and it's dying. That's also affecting our tourism industry. And additionally, that coral is providing a barrier for us, especially in these islands, against hurricanes and tsunamis. So when that coral is destroyed, we have less of that kind of defense to hurricanes and those sorts of disasters. Now, speaking of disasters, climate change is also going to increase the intensity of the natural disasters that we see. We can remember last year's hurricane season, we had a number of very, very devastating Category 5 storms, and we can expect to see this sort of thing going forward as climate change continues. Additionally, there's also air pollution that's affecting our health. And in turn, once you start talking about health, you're talking about the labor force, you're talking about reduction in productivity. So there's all this economic loss. It's also affecting our beaches. Our beaches are being eroded, and in the Caribbean, we know that tourism is one of our major economic drivers. So you know that if people aren't coming to see our nice, pretty white sand beaches, then we're having a loss in the tourism sector. So what we need to do is to stop thinking of climate change in a sort of environmental vacuum and understand that climate change is affecting us physically, socially, and economically. It's affecting our quality of life. It's affecting our ability to develop, especially as small countries in the Caribbean where we're looking to things like agriculture, fishing, and tourism. Climate change is going to affect all of these things. And when we're talking about development and moving into the future, we have to bear in mind that we have to address these issues first, or along with whatever form of development we're trying to do. What CARICOM really needs to be doing is a number of things working together in order to combat the issue of climate change. It's not going away, it's already here. And the truth of the matter is it's not something that we can fix. What we now have to do is adapt to it and figure out, okay, what's the best way to move forward? So we need to be building resilience in the communities, first of all, making them more resilient to disasters, making them more resilient to the effects of climate change. Then we need to be enacting and enforcing policy that creates a sort of framework in which some of these initiatives can take place. And finally, and most importantly, we have to be raising awareness among our citizens about this climate change thing is real, and it's not some far-fetched notion. This is affecting you in your daily life every day. In the Caribbean specifically, we should be focusing on reducing our emissions, and this can be done through policy, but it can also be done in our day-to-day life. We can carpool, we can look at public transportation, that sort of thing. We need to definitely be protecting our coastlines and oceans. There are a lot of mangrove restoration projects that are helping to build resilience on the coastline. We need to be counteracting our greenhouse gases, something as simple as planting a tree to absorb some of that carbon dioxide. We can do tomorrow if we want to. And finally, in terms of disaster preparation, we really need to be putting a lot more effort into preparing for increased disasters and disasters of different kinds, not just the hurricanes, but also earthquakes, tsunamis, extreme droughts, that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, we are young people in this room, and the truth of the matter is that our parents and our grandparents and the generations before us have really left us in quite a pickle. But it's our age group and the age groups that are coming after us that are really going to have to live with the consequences of these actions. So it's really our responsibility. If we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. To become activists and participate in the climate change conversation. And that is it. Thank you.
Excellent job there, Eleanor. Thank you very much for that. All right, now we're going to take we're going to just take a total of 4 questions in this segment. So let's take, yes.
So we do have to apologize, but to facilitate our online person,
yes,
the stream is going to cut at 7. And we do want to hear some responses from the SG on mental health as well, because there are persons tuning in for that.
So we'll take,
have to limit the questions from here and on.
Right, so we're gonna take just 4 here. So let's take the first 2. And SG will ask you to respond to them as quickly as you can so we can get through as many of them. So I see the first hand there. Can I have one more person? And I'm going to take someone who preferably has not asked a question as yet, please, so that we can share. All right, so I have 2 persons, a gentleman in the blue and lady right here in the black and white. You go. Yes, go ahead. Can you just come closer so you can get the microphone? Thank you.
Good evening, Shannon Dennis. My question with respect to climate change is that what does the CARICOM have in place to track our carbon footprints? Because, most of the countries have signed the Treaty of Paris in order to reduce carbon emission. However, there are no structures in place, at least not in Jamaica, to track our carbon emissions. So how can we send to the Treaty of Paris to reduce carbon emission below a certain percentage? However, there is nothing in place to tell what our carbon emission is.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. So my question is a bit similar. I'll start with an introduction. So islands such as Barbados have taken the initiative to resort to more eco-friendly lifestyle practices, such as the use of renewable energy, carpooling, composting, etc. But what is CARICOM doing as a body to educate and encourage CARICOM states to take this approach to adapt and move towards the development of a more sustainable environment?
To the best of my knowledge, and if I'm wrong, please forgive me, but to the best of my knowledge, some work had been done, not within the region, but external to us with regards to the carbon footprints of each of our countries. I do recall seeing a document citing, different measurements, let's put it that way, on carbon footprint. But we are not, what is very, very clear is that we are not the major emitters. We are not. I mean, given our populations and whatnot and the number of vehicles we have, and we don't burn our forests willy-nilly and so on, that we are not a major contributor to greenhouse gases. But we are feeling the brunt of it. We are working through the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center with all the member states on them meeting the NDCs, national contributions. I forget what the D means right now. Nationally determined contributions. And then I want to congratulate you on an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Really, really top class. So we're working with each other countries. We're also working with them on how to access resources from the Green Climate Fund to allow for adaptation. As a voice collectively, we've been quite formidable, our member states working collectively. If there's ever a success story on the community working as a group, is in the climate negotiations in Paris and subsequent to that. And I have to say that the youth of the region played a very, very critical role in providing the support and the NGO community. The tagline 1.5 to stay alive came from a youth. We didn't invent that at the Secretariat or the Climate Change Center. That came from a youth. So we're doing as much as we can in that regard and encouraging renewables. That goes to the second question. We're promoting renewable energy in our community. We're promoting energy efficiency in our community. We have set collectively targets to achieve certain measures of energy efficiency for certain years, and my memory doesn't allow me to tell you what these targets are right now, but I think we have them online. And we're working assiduously to get that done with individual member states on renewables. I know you mentioned Barbados. I know Jamaica is making some tremendous strides in wind energy. Barbados is on solar, and others are in hydro, and others are in, so we're doing quite a bit in that regard. And there's an economic impact of that. For us, it is more the economic impact of lowering the cost of energy that will contribute to competitiveness as well. Okay?
All right, so we have a question coming out of St. Lucia from Sade. So the question goes, Caribbean states are constantly developing, and within the coming decade, it is expected that the region will experience the highest rate of development. How do we ensure that growth is sustainable, and does that significantly reduce the natural resources that contribute to climate change resilience?
I think the very discussion we're having here is part of that contribution. We're also looking at an environment policy for our community. We're now in the midst of having the consultations with the various environment ministries to determine what is that policy that we can live with as a guide for the national level. Because as you rightly say, we want to use the resources in a sustainable way, so that the generations to come, not just this generation, but the generations to come, have a place to live with that's sustainable and will be. So we're pushing sustainable development across all sectors. The environment is one, but we mentioned energy. The use of marine resources is also very critical. We don't overfish our waters. We leave the stock for the future. and our farming practices that does not allow for soil erosion and soil leaching and bleaching of the soils. So this is work that's ongoing. Obviously, the implementation is at the national level. What we're doing at the community level is promoting a regional policy that's in the works.
All right, I have one question. And it's about CARICOM's advocacy on Caribbean government's budgeting for disaster risk resilience. Now, the CDB advises that the economic cost of natural disasters are, on average, 2% per annum in the region. In 1989, we had Hurricane Hugo that wiped out 434% of Montserrat's GDP. Ivan in 2004 took 200% of Grenada's GDP. Erica in 2015, 96% of Dominica's GDP. Maria in 2017, 225% of Dominica's GDP, and I'm sure you would know that, sir. What is CARICOM doing to advocate or support the region with building disaster risk resilience into our budgeting? So that's ex-ante budgeting, and ensuring that we have resiliency funds, or that our CARICOM nations are adhering to strict building codes, which are important in disaster risk resilience.
I was about to say it's not just about budgeting, and you give the perfect example of building codes. An assessment that was done by CDEMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, has found that in all our jurisdictions, there are building codes in law that are mostly not being enforced for various reasons. The persons are not there to enforce it. Sometimes the building codes, some of our builders do not know how to adhere to the codes. We don't have inspectors to ensure that the codes are adhered to. So it's not just about putting money, but it's how you build the capacity to enforce. And enforcement not in the way of a punitive measure, but encouraging and working with persons to ensure that they do so. Certainly the experience of the last hurricane season has brought building resilience to everybody's mind, not just Dominica and the British Virgin Islands and Antigua and so on that were hit, but other countries. I know other prime ministers, I know other countries are very, very actively promoting and seeking the resources to build resources and to build resilience. We are looking at what, as a region, can we do to facilitate that, and that's very, very early discussion, because again, the experience is showing, coming out of Grenada in 2004 and how long it took Grenada, and it's not an overnight job, so it's just not a criticism. It takes a long time to rebuild a country that is totally devastated. And Grenada has put in place in their reconstruction resilience measures. The Caribbean Development Bank has recently, as I think about 2 years ago, most of their, if not all of their infrastructure loans have a resilience component, so that it can, and I understand that a number of projects that withstood the hurricane in Dominica, for instance, were funded by the CDB, and they stood up, the seawalls and so on. But we're finding as well that the skills to allow us to do that are not readily available. Skills that we never thought that, skill sets we might not have needed in the past are now needed. How do you design a bridge, for instance, and you have rivers here that flood, and other talks that can withstand the kind of rage that the water brings? And how do you build seawalls that can withstand that? I was talking to an engineer and saying that the type of engineers that we require in terms of understanding hydrology and so on, we just don't have in our region, and that's an area for skill development. We're working with the governments. There will be a major discussion at this meeting on that. CDEMA is having a symposium, a consultation, as we speak in Montego Bay. They started this morning. They will conclude tomorrow afternoon, and they will make some very specific recommendations to the heads of government for adoption. Did I answer all the questions? Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, SG. So as we said before, we do apologize, but we have to try and transition now into the mental health discussion to get some feedback from the SG. So I'm going to invite Ms. Brooks, who is the president of the Mental Health Advocacy Network, to provide a background on mental health and or set the context and then get responses. Oh, Tamika Coley, my apologies.
Evening, everyone. I'm Tamika Coley from JAMHAN, Jamaica Mental Health Advocacy Network, and I'm speaking about mental health. Yay! All right, so the first thing I want to say is that a lot of people hear mental health and think that mental health and illness are interchangeable. They're not. Everyone has health, everyone has mental health. There's a continuum, so you can be healthy or you can be on the other end of the spectrum. So I'm going to just briefly run through this because we don't have a lot of time. But really, mental health and illness, we need to accept it. That's the first thing. We have an issue where we don't speak about it at all. We don't create safe spaces to acknowledge anything uncomfortable. And that is one of the biggest problems that we face because the stigma cannot be eradicated that way. So the first thing I want to really address is the fact that there's stigma everywhere, and it now is at a point where we're losing a lot of youth across the region because we can't speak to our parents, we can't speak to our teachers, and so on. So I'm just going to go through, give a little bit of background information, and then go right into the statistics. Sorry to be so quick, I'm just trying to work with the time. So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about our mental well-being, our emotions, thoughts and feelings, our ability to solve problems, overcome difficulties, social connections, how we understand and interact with the world around us. Mental illness, however, is clinically diagnosable, disorders that affects all these things, the way we think, the way we behave, the way we can work, the way we can interact. There are 4 Ds of abnormality that assist in the diagnosis of mental illness. These are deviance, dysfunction, distress, and danger, which distress is really how you're coping. Danger is about whether you're a danger to yourself, a danger to others. There are determinants of mental health and mental disorders, not just individual attributes, but the way that you interact with your community and with your working environment. There are a lot of things that can cause these problems: stress, genetics, nutrition, infections, exposure to even environmental hazards, as the young lady brought up earlier, and many more contributing factors. So really, I just want to stress that being on the mental health continuum, it doesn't necessarily mean that a certain set of people or someone who is weaker is susceptible. Anybody can be affected, and that is why we really need to jump on it. So, statistics time. World Health Organization in 2016 reported that 4% of the regional population was treated for mental illnesses in 2015. Most prevalent mental disorders were and still are schizophrenia and depression, with the highest diagnosis rate being in the 18 to 30 age category, again, youth. Suicide is an important possible outcome of mental illness, which is very topical right now, as we're seeing, fortunately and unfortunately. And the mortality rate for suicide in the region is 7.3 per 100,000. 90% of suicide victims have a diagnosable chronic mental disorder such as depression, schizophrenia, or substance abuse. Depression in the region aligns with global trends where 35% of females and 24.8% of males suffer from it. 73.5% of adults, and severe to moderate disorders, 82% among children and teenagers. Across the region, 76 to 85% of people with mental disorders do not receive any treatment for their disorder. Also, according to World Health Organization, last year, only 3.5% of total health budgets in the CARICOM region was allocated to mental health, meaning the main psychiatric hospitals or other facilities. The social and economic costs that mental, neurological, and substance use disorders represent for individuals and communities can be overcome with more investment and a paradigm shift, and models placing people and not illness in the center of the system, focusing on recoveries rather than on cures. More statistics to give us reasons on why you should care. Before I go into the statistics, childhood psychiatric disorders are associated with educational failure, with risk-taking behaviors, with increased likelihood in entering criminal justice system. And in Jamaica, we have 25% of suicides among persons 15 to 24 years old. 9.7% students 10 to 15 years old, with 35.5% of students admitting to suicidal ideations in their lifetime. 49% of youth have attempted suicide, and we surveyed 1,300 students. 69% of these 1,300 students admitted to experiencing suicidal thoughts in the last year. 25% said they think these thoughts very often. 27% have threatened suicide. Another thing that's important to note is that in school, we have a kind of a bullying culture in the region, in many areas. We find that 60 to 65% of students have been bullied, and this also contributes very highly to increased stress and increased mental health issues. I don't have much time. I was just warned. So I really just want to say that we would love more data so that we can attack this from every angle. We need funding for public awareness initiatives. We need more legislation surrounding mental health issues. We need more community and integrative programs. We need more mental health workers. And one solution for this could be that, well, one affordable solution to this could be that we can train community members, teachers, students, just peer-to-peer to make it cheaper and even more of a way to connect on a level. Because of the stigma, a lot of people don't want to go to mental health professionals. So we have to kind of start somewhere, and we really need to get the ball going now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamika. Great context there, and definitely reasons for us to be concerned in the region, right? Now, we will remember that at the beginning, our Secretary-General said he's here to learn about mental health and also take the recommendations from us. And Tamika, I heard you gave some recommendations there. You spoke specifically of the public awareness programs that need to be funded so more of us in the region can get to talk about it. And for us, for many other women and even the men, they said that we only talk about our problems with our hairdressers and barbers. And oftentimes they are not equipped to deal with the real mental health issues that many of us are facing. But at least we get to talk, right? All right. So maybe some awareness raising initiatives would be very, very useful because they can then point us to where we get the help. I'm going to turn over now to Odane because we do have time for just a few questions.
Right. So I'm just going to jump into a question that came at us from Samantha. She's a CYA in Guyana. Yes, she's a CYA in Guyana. So she said, one of the root causes of mental health is the inability to cope with stress situations or overcome difficulties. Are there mind development programs in place that focus on strengthening the mindset of youth, our young people? As mentioned, rather treatment is better than prevention, or prevention is better than the treatment. And we will take one from the floor as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Tia Ferguson. I am the Students' Union President for UTEC. If I may add to awareness, I'm aware that I did a research on it. I'm a pharmacy student. That marijuana, the THC that is within marijuana, has a lot of psychiatric problems, and it causes a lot of situations. However, I believe as Jamaicans, we are a bit shying away from saying that smoking marijuana gives a lot of psychological issues. And I think we need to raise more awareness, because we always say smoking is bad for your health, but we don't normally link it back to being psychological. We say, okay, it causes cancer or it causes lung disease, but we don't link it back to a lot of the psychological issues that we have. So I think in raising awareness, this would be a great part to actually focus on.
All right, we'll take some comments from the SG.
Thank you. I want to start by complimenting Tamika for an excellent presentation. I listened to you very, very carefully. I wish time would have permitted for me to hear more of it. If it is possible for you to share your document with me, I'll be very, very happy. Taking note of what you've said in terms of advocacy, in terms of counseling, in terms of the stigma, in terms of being able to recognize it at the family level. If you have a person that may be having a tendency, or a child, sorry, or a sibling or offspring that has a tendency or whatnot, These are issues that we have, certainly I'm speaking now as an individual and as a family man, issues that we have to address. We do not have, as I mentioned before, any regional programs on that. I am not aware, and I forgive me, that there's been any substantial discussion on it at the regional level. But certainly what you have said, and the statistics I know, some of which from some of the other islands and some of which I know from here, is very worrying, and there's need for address. And the social environment in which our youth are growing up in now is totally different from when I was your age or when I was younger than that. Children having hypertension because of stress, for instance, not just because of what they eat, because of stress that's imposed by being more competitive at schools and having to sit a number of CXCs that I can't even count that high and that sort of thing. I think there's some things that we have to be aware of. Sometimes we as parents put a stress on our kids to excel, and you know, when my kids were getting ready to sit the CXC, I told them how many I sat. I sat GC, I didn't sit CXC. I didn't sit, I think I must have sat about 7 or 8, and I don't think I did too badly, did I? Here I am. I don't see why we have to do 12 and 14 and 15 of them. To do what? You know, I mean, I'm not knocking the system, but it's a stress on us. It's a stress. So I take note. I am very much aware of and I believe the Marijuana Commission has noted that THC has a tendency for persons who may have a latent psychosis to bring it out. It doesn't affect everybody equally. It's persons who have a latent tendency towards being psychotic, or psychosis, I think the doctors call it. It triggers it. And we have to be aware of that. I'm not sure if there's a way of identifying it before, but certainly you can see when it's coming on, because I have had some friends or persons that I've known. My son has had a friend, you know, that obviously was affected by that. But I think that is somewhat slightly different from what was being spoken about. But we have to be aware of it, and the Marijuana Commission is aware of it.
Tamika, you wanted to come in on that point? Yes.
Thank you for raising the marijuana point. You are correct. THC does tend to bring it out if you already have the latent tendencies. However, CBD combats it. So to circle back to the marijuana industry point, it would be really good if we could get some medical marijuana for persons who need the treatment, because it is one of the most effective. I have personally used it, and it works really well.
Thank you. All right. We saw, okay. We had 2 hands in audience. I saw your hand and Teresa's, and actually see the gentleman at the back. So if you could do them very, very quickly, because we have one from online that we have to get to. All right? So we'll take you 3 quickly, please. Please just come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Samantha Grant. I'm from the University of the West Indies, the law representative. And my question is, I'm coming from a very competitive high school, and we're living in a time where, yes, we have to sit more exams. We're taught to be more competitive youth and to seek employment, as unemployment is so high at this point in time. So what can the school system do, or can I make a recommendation that mental health be incorporated in the school atmosphere and in the school arena to attack these situations from very, very young?
Good evening, Secretary-General. Damani Paris from the UWI Youth Development Program. I just wanted to ask, and it has to do with the same challenges that we're expressing as it relates to the data and insufficient data. Would you agree with me, Secretary-General, that there certainly is a need for us to have a comprehensive, perhaps regional leadership on the gathering of data as it relates to mental health challenges and other challenges affecting our young people, and the actual able to respond, having data-driven responses being generated by the regional leadership? Do you think that is really where we need to go at this time, perhaps to have the central leadership provide some guidance on those matters?
Thank you so much for facilitating my question. I'm taking off my CARICOM Youth Ambassador hat to put on my PAHO Consult hat, PANCAP Regional Youth Steering Committee. And my question really is about, I am not clear as to whether or not within the region we have looked at the possibility of having countries treat members who are part of the CARICOM block as they would their locals at comparable cost in hospitals. And I'm wondering if that exists. Secondly, what I found very jarring from the AHA training that we did recently was just the high suicide rates in a number of CARICOM countries. And interestingly enough, the boys, males, were actually at a higher rate of suicide than females. My question really is, can we look at the possibility of including mental health checkups and so on as a part of the insurance health frameworks that we have within, so for example, the Sagicor and the Guardian and so on? And in the same way that we recommend that you do one checkup with your gynecologist and go to the doctor at least 2 to 3 times and your dentist twice a year, you do your mental health checkups and it is covered within the insurance mandates.
And the final question, so I hope okay, he's good. So the final question is coming out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines from Shernell Hadaway. So she asked, how can we create a safe space for youth to voice their feelings? What is being done within CARICOM to break the taboo associated with mental health, which hopefully would lead to more youths expressing their emotions in a manner that is not injurious to their health?
Okay. I take note of the recommendation on the insurance. I don't know how that works, but certainly I do take note of it. On the national treatment on health services, cross-border health services, that issue has come up from time to time. We've reached the point where there's no agreement, but a recognition at least that primary health care should be made available emergency health care should be made available to CARICOM nationals who move under the skills regime and otherwise. I know some countries have it already in place without having been told to do it with regards to skills or anything. I was talking to one prime minister and he said to me, but any CARICOM national who comes and goes to our hospital for an emergency will be treated as a national. But we have not yet we do not yet have full agreement on that. That is part of our contingent rights negotiations that is bogged down for ever so long. And we need to at least, my view on that is to start with as small as you can and grow it rather than wait for everything you can get out of it in terms of a negotiating process. Of course, data is critical. And social data, generally speaking, we need data on domestic abuse. We tried that. We had an advocate for a while who tried to do something on that. We need a lot of data on we do not have sufficient data in our region. We are not data driven sufficiently in terms of taking decisions. It's a major problem. The need for that is something that's recognized. There is one advocate among our heads of government, Prime Minister Keith Mitchell, who is a trained statistician, keeps us on our toes on the need for that. And you'll be surprised to know that, as I didn't say it, is not a sexy topic, but it's one of the items on the agenda of the heads of government this week. Good. In terms of having a regional approach, a regional strategy to generating statistics. Now, it's not specific to mental health. It is generally in terms of the environment, in terms of social, in terms of trade, and so on. You can't make decisions without having data to make proper. Did I touch on everything?
There was the in-school recommendation for dealing with mental
I had a discussion with the head of CXC. You mentioned the pressure of exams, and his response to me was the SBA was supposed to. When I went to school, there was no SBA. I had to read all them books, Shakespeare and all kind of thing like that had no relevance to me. Forgive me those who studied the classics, but I didn't know what I was doing. I had to study Latin and all kind of stuff. I didn't know why I had to do that. You have SBAs now, and that is a way of allowing for being taught and being graded for what you learn in the classroom, assisting from having to get all of your grades at one sitting. And that relieves some of the pressure, and that was a deliberate move by CXC into that. There's also recognition of the need for counselors in schools. Again, we do not have very many trained counselors in our region, but it has been, I know it has been recognized as something that needs to be done at the national level by many of our schools. I'm not sure many of my colleagues that if the human resource development strategy, which is a holistic approach to human resource development, has that on board, I certainly will look at it. It does? Yeah, if not, we can look, you see, I'm being advised by my colleagues to my right and my left that it does take that into account as well. Yes?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to follow up on that question of stress in school. What research is showing is that the challenge isn't necessarily because there's too much schoolwork, but because there's a reduction in playtime. A lot of the data coming out of the United States and out of Europe, unfortunately we don't have that data in our population, is that we have restricted the time that used to be set for play for lunch. And so you have 35 to 40 minutes to stand in line, grab your lunch, get back in class. And what psychologists are finding is that when you give young people, not even at the high school CSEC level, but young people in basic schools, primary schools, secondary schools as well, time to play is a critical de-stressor for them. Creative problem solving, teamwork,
socializing.
All of those things they're losing, and those are such important parts of developing strong mental networks in the brain. So I would hope that at some point, a meeting perhaps with ministers of education across CARICOM about how we can return playtime to the curriculum as a means of preventing some of those mental health challenges.
I can tell you there are discussions in that area as well. It also helps with your socializing skills because the kind of play that you have. No, I don't want any youth out there any kid in school listening to say that the Secretary-General say that he's doing too much exams. That is not the message, because I believe in hard work. I really believe in hard work. I just think we have to recognize that the circumstances and the conditions upon which is being done now is different, and it has to be addressed. But I encourage. You're only going to succeed. Those of you who are here, I'm sure, know it, by hard, focused work. It ain't no easy ride. I didn't get an easy ride. You know, it's the long hours you put in for you to get where you are. And your reward, my reward, has never been monetary. It has been in myself achieving what I set out to go. There can be no greater reward than setting out a goal and you achieve it. You know? So let me get the message clear. But there is a concern that has to be addressed in that regard.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We really want to wrap, but I feel like it would be remiss of me to not take the question from the senior director. So I'll take your question.
Just something for us to explore, given that research also suggests that adult support helps with better social outcomes for persons, especially young persons. So mentorship, exploring how we can develop a framework for mentorship in the region could help our young persons to combat some of those issues that we're talking about as well.
We actually have that. I don't know how often we do that. I have to tell you so. Mentorship, and another one, when we did the national consultations throughout the region, we got some of those, and it actually is in there. It may be masked, but it's in there. Trust me. I just don't know how I'm going to deliver it. I'm being honest with you.
All right. So one that's a lighter one. I got this before when we were in the climate change discussion, and I was asked to see if I could slip it in at the end. This one is from one of the viewers on Facebook, Kalia Robertson. She says, "Good evening, SG. Has there been any initiative aimed at strengthening the linguistic capacity of CARICOM students and future employees from an earlier age, such as primary school level? This in order to reduce language barriers both within the community, given that French is the official language of Haiti and Dutch for Suriname, and between our closest neighbors in Latin America, who of course speak Spanish and Portuguese, with the objective of facilitating wider integration in the Caribbean and Latin America."
There is, if it has not yet been done, I believe it might be done in some schools where languages are being introduced in primary level. To encourage that, and of course we do recognize that our part of the world is not only English speakers. Even in our community, we do have French and Dutch speakers. As a matter of fact, there are more French speakers and more Creole speakers, to be quite honest. And to tell a lot of our friends in Haiti who I hope are listening, even though we're speaking in English. So we recognize that. I believe it's being done at the level. At the community level, we're grappling with the issue of how to treat with the different languages. English is the official language of the Caribbean community. I wish I had the resources to accommodate the other two language groups into our official work. We've costed it, and it is prohibitive in terms of the budget that we have. Regrettably, it is something that I think is desirable. It is necessary eventually, but I do not know if I will be able to deliver on that one. I myself, knowing a word or two in Creole coming from Dominica, understand what it is to communicate with persons who, even though you're in English, in an English-speaking country, their preferred lingo is Creole. I understand what it is, but we just don't have the resources at the community level there to go beyond English being an official language. But the encouragement for that in the schools are there. I just wanted to, since we're wrapping up, on a very light note, to tell Tamika, when you spoke about Tetris, where's Tamika? Eleanor. She stepped out. It brought back. I took a 2-week vacation once and I told my wife I'm going to stay home to rest. And I found my son's Tetris game, and I spent 2 weeks playing that game, and my wife bought me one. I have one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, young people all, can we give our Secretary-General a round of applause? SG, we really want to thank you for making the time to meet with the young people, not only in Jamaica, but in the Caribbean region, because as you see, we had to facilitate questions from other young persons within the region. This has been Ask the SG876 Live. This youth forum was brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information's Youth and Adolescent Policy Division, the Jamaica Youth Ambassadors Program, and the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Program. I think we'll all agree that we had a fantastic conversation, and we didn't just talk, we gave actual recommendations. The work now is on us to hold the SG accountable, to follow up, to make sure that anything that he said he would explore, even if he doesn't get to it, we have to say, well, SG, did you try this? Did you try that? And also to hold the leaders of our country accountable. We hope to see even more fantastic work being done by our youth ambassadors in the region. And we start with commending them for this kind of engagement. And we hope to see more with more young people from right around our region. Thank you so much for staying with us. And we thank you so much for staying with us here in the room. And we want to thank the viewers who stayed with us on UETV, who were streaming live this evening. Ask the SG876 Live. This is Kamisha Kelly signing out.
Can I have a last word? I should
Oh, yes, sir.
But I just have to say thank you to our two moderators, Kamisha and Odin, for doing a fantastic job. I believe they did I think you guys did a fantastic job. I want to thank you for affording me the opportunity for being here with you as well. Thank you.